Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." Peter answered him, "Even if they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly, I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all the disciples said the same. Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little further, he fell down on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you cannot keep watch with me 1 hour? Watch, pray that you may not enter into temptation, for the spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak." And again, he went away and prayed for a second time, saying, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found his disciples sleeping, for they were heavy with sleep. So leaving them again, he went and he prayed for a third time, saying the same words again. And then he came and said to his disciples, "Sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. See, my betrayer is at hand." While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with clubs and swords from the chief priests and the elders of the people. And the betrayer had given them a sign. "The one I kiss is the man. Seize him." And Judas came to Jesus at once and said to him, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." And then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father? And he will at once send more than 12 legions of angels. But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled? That it must be so." And at that hour, he addressed the crowds, saying, "Do you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day, I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." And then all the disciples left him and fled.
He came from his blessed throne, salvation to bestow. But men made strange and none that longed for Christ would know. But oh, my friend indeed, who at my need his life did spend.
And those who had seized Jesus took him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered. And Peter followed him from a distance up to the courtyard of the high priest. And going in, he sat with the guard to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony in order that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward who said, "This man said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days.'" And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you?" But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, "I adjure you, by the living God, tell us, are you the Christ, the Son of God?" Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." And the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" And they said, "He must be put to death." And they spit in his face and struck him. And some slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that hit you?" And Peter was seated outside in the courtyard. And a servant girl came up to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." And he denied it before them all and said, "I do not know what you mean." And going out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him and said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth. But again, he denied it with an oath. I do not know the man. And a little later, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you. And he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel in order to put Jesus to death. And they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor.
Sometimes they strew his way, and his sweet praises sing, resounding all the day, hosannas to their King. Then crucified is all their breath, and for his death they thirst and cried.
Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that he was condemned, he changed his mind and took back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. And so throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed and went and hanged himself. And the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful that they be put into the treasury, since it is blood money. And so they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. And therefore that field is called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been written through the prophet Jeremiah, saying, they took 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been laid by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them to the potter for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said to him, you have said so. But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave them no answer. So Pilate said to him, do you not hear the many things that they testify against you? But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. And so when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, who do you want me to release for you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides that, when he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him saying, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." But the chief priests and the elders had persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two shall I release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." And Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified."
Why, what hath my Lord done? What makes this rage and spite? He made the lame to run, he gave the blind their sight. Sweet injuries, yet they at these themselves displease, and 'gainst him rise.
When Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowds and said, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And then he released for them Barabbas. And having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Now the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. And when the whole battalion was gathered before him, they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and put a reed in his hand. And kneeling down before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit on him. And taking the reed, they struck him in the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. And as they went out, they found a man from Cyrene, Simon by name, and they compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place which is called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine mixed with gall to drink. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they crucified him, they divided up his garments among them by casting lots. And they sat down there to keep watch over him. And above his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." And all the passers-by derided him, wagging their heads, saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and the elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others. He can't save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God save him if he desires him, for he said, I am the Son of God. 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. And the 2 robbers also reviled him in the same way.
They rise and needs will have my dear Lord made a way. A murderer they save, the Prince of Life they slay. Yet cheerful he to suffering goes, that he his foes from thence might free.
And from the 6th hour there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders who heard it said, this man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge and filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And the earth shook, and the rocks split, and the tombs also were opened, and the bodies of many of the saints who had fallen asleep rose. And coming out from the tombs after his resurrection, they entered into the holy city and appeared to many. And when the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what had taken place, they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. Many women also were there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee.
In life no house, no home, my Lord on earth might have. In death no friendly tomb, but what a stranger gave. What may I say? Heaven was his home, but mine the tomb wherein he lay.
When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was one of Jesus' disciples. He went and asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Pilate ordered that it be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut from the rock. And he rolled a great stone against the entrance and went away. And Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. The next day, that is the day after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember that impostor said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.' Order that the tomb be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." And so they went and secured the tomb by sealing the stone and setting the guard.